Things can change really quickly in the realm of gaming. Just a few years ago, Kickstarter was raving up the gaming community. Nostalgic fans were ready to throw millions of dollars on an idea with only the promise that it'll turn out great. Some were even saying that it was going to be the new way to pre-order games for cheap. It only took a year or two for reality to come crashing down. It turns out giving large amounts of money to people inexperienced with making games or managing projects can lead to catastrophic results. It might not be surprising that games such as the Stomping Lands failed, but even experienced developers like 22 Cans and Double Fine who failed to meet expectations with Broken Age and Goddess. Not every project went nowhere though. Pillars of Eternity and Wasteland 2 and many others were released and praised by both gamers and critics alike. Most of the projects on Kickstarter banked on the nostalgia of fans eager to experience games like they used to play while growing up and that are no longer available nowadays. There is one of the successful Kickstarter that was met with an unusual situation. The IP holder of the original series decided to reboot the series along the same time. Work began on Xenonauts in 2009, but only came to global attention in 2012 when they started their Kickstarter, and only a mere month after the devs of XCOM Enemy Unknown announced it at E3. The Kickstarter was completed and managed to garner $154,000, but it would only be a fraction of what 2K could afford with its game. Thankfully for the developer of the smaller project, the game envisioned by both of them were quite different, with 2K choosing a far more streamlined approach, whereas Xenonauts remained far more faithful to the original game. Xenonauts is a turn-based tactical RPG made by Goldhawk Interactive, in which you have to fend off an invasion of aliens that are vastly superior in numbers and technology. The world is divided into subcontinents that fund you as long as you protect them adequately. In order to do that, you must build bases around the world and send fighter jets to defeat UFOs scattered all over the geoscape, disrupting wherever they go. Once the UFO is down, you can send ground troops to kill the crew and scavenge the remains. The funding of a subcontinent will lower every time you fail to stop a UFO from completing its mission in that area. If the funding of a region reaches 0, it will abandon the Xenonaut project, and if 5 regions do so, it's game over. The main objective of the game is to capture aliens of higher and higher ranks, to find out the hierarchy of the aliens, and finally find the leader you can kill to put a stop to the invasion, once and for all. Sending your interceptors after UFO doesn't guarantee they will reach it. They have a limited amount of fuel and a set speed that may or may not be enough to catch up to the UFO. If they do, however, a panel will open up and you'll have to fight them on a 2D plane. In that minigame, you have full control of the interceptors. You have to position yourself so that the UFO is in your line of fire, but you are not in theirs. And eventually your minigun and missiles will take it down. If you do get in their cone of fire, you have the ability to do an evasive roll to get out of it, or use afterburners to get a quick burst of speed. It's important to learn how to use them properly, because your planes do not have much health and will go down very quickly otherwise. You won't lose the plane altogether since it'll be salvaged, but it'll take quite a few days to repair. You also have the ability to retreat at any time, so you can use hit and run tactics if you so desire. Unfortunately, there's only a semblance of difficulty in this minigame. As you go through it multiple times, you'll soon notice that the UFOs always target the interceptor closest to them. Knowing this, you can easily bait the UFO with one plane and then have another attack it from behind where it cannot fight back. If you get tired of doing it, or if you have a really hard time pulling it off, you always have the option to auto-resolve. And in this game, auto-resolve is quite effective. Once you've shut down an alien ship, you can then send your dropship, filled with 8 to 12 soldiers depending on the model, to finally get to the ground combat, which is the part of the game you'll be spending the most time in. Every character has a certain number of time units they get to use each turn. How much of it they have is determined by their stats and how heavy their equipment is. Moving, shooting, looking at different directions, or any other action in the game uses some of it. Having more really helps your ability to move around, but not necessarily your attacks, because those use up a certain percent of your total time units, rather than a set amount like the others do. Most weapons have 2 to 3 different attacks to choose from, with the more expensive ones being generally the most accurate, so you often have to choose between shooting once and having a high probability of hitting your target, or shooting twice and being much more likely to miss, in the hope of doing double damage. Unlike XCOM Enemy Unknown, you can spend all your points in any order you like. Firing doesn't prevent you from moving, and you can move both before and after a shot if you so desire. You can hide behind objects and structures to reduce the chance of getting hit. Most cover provide 45% protection, but some go as high as 67%. Walls protect you completely, although they do not allow you to shoot back as well. Everything on the map except the UFO structure is destructible, so cover can only take you so much if you stay on the same spot for too long. You can also crouch at a very low cost of time units to both increase your accuracy and reduce your chance of getting hit as well. It's really important to make sure all your men are behind cover and crouched whenever you hand a turn if you want them to live long. Whenever someone takes an action within the line of sight of a character of the other side, there's a chance a reaction shot will be fired. The likeliness is determined by the type of weapon, the reflex stat of the attacker, and how much time units that attacker has left. The game isn't so much about flanking like in Enemy Unknown because of how common and unpredictable reaction fire is compared to the clearly announced Overwatch in that game. And there are no pods, so enemy can come from anywhere at any time, if you're not careful. Instead, you have to move a bit more defensively, moving from cover to cover, making sure everything is cleared along the way. Otherwise, things could go very wrong very quickly. There are a couple different types of missions in the game. Most of the time it'll be crash site missions, where you are tasked with scavenging the UFO you fell with your interceptors. You have to secure the UFO or kill all the enemies on the map. There are also civilians to protect on the map if you want extra income. There's usually just a few numbers of aliens outside the ship trying to kill all the civilians in the area. So you just have to make your way to the UFO, where most of the resistance will come from. Most of the time the enemy will be waiting for you to get in their line of sight to shoot back right away, which makes breaching particularly dangerous for your men. The size of UFOs only increases as the campaign goes along. At first you might only have one room with 1 or 2 enemies, but later on you have multiple floors with a dozen enemies contained within. The second type is far less common, and it's called terror missions. They take place on large urban maps where there's a lot of civilians and even more enemies. Your dropship is often surrounded at first, which makes the beginning very dangerous, but after that, they come slowly. Once 20 turns have elapsed, the local authorities remove the fog of war with their scouting, so you can pick off the rest more effectively. Both of these types of mission are affected by the time of day. Night ops are seriously discouraged because you only see half as far compared to the day, whereas the aliens are unaffected by it. You are given unlimited flares to highlight your path, but you still likely get shot at from far beyond the fog of war. During mid-game, aliens will start building bases as well. You'll be given the option to assault them. The bases contain a lot of large rooms filled with enemies, linked by long hallways with little to no cover. Because of this, you'll often have to charge into a room with enemies present and hope they don't get to kill you before you get a chance to shoot first. You can complete the mission in 2 different ways. You can destroy their power generator and flee, which will get the base to self-destruct, or kill all enemies and salvage everything in the base. The last mission type is base defense. UFOs will sometimes invade your bases, and then it's up to you to defend it or lose it all. They will try to get to your command center and destroy everything on their path, and all you have to do is stop them. There's a decent amount of enemy variety in the game, but you only get to experience it further down the line. At the beginning of a campaign, there's only 2 different aliens you'll fight for the first 2 months. It certainly helps to familiarize yourself with the game during your first playthrough, but on subsequent campaigns it can become a bit annoying. After that point, they usually add a new species every month. There are psychics that cripple the minds of your soldiers, lizard-like creatures that are tanks and regenerate a lot of health every turn, robots with tons of armor, or insects that can turn your men into zombies and become one of the creatures themselves. There are even teleporting frogs that will appear behind you, and quite a few other species and robots. It's just too bad you don't have access to all that at the beginning. Just like the original XCOM, sometimes the game can seem quite unfair. Alien weapons are far stronger than yours at the beginning. They can often even kill your men in a single hit. Aliens also have a longer line of sight than your soldiers do. And with permanent death, every life matters. Losing a soldier makes a world of difference, and can set you back greatly. Your own soldiers can't hit anything just right in front of them, even though they're supposed to come from special forces. But they do improve greatly as they go through missions, because their stats grow organically. Whenever they run for a long period of time, their time units increases. If they shoot a lot, their accuracy will increase as well, and their strength also does whenever they carry heavy equipment. After a set number of stat increases, they will increase in rank. The ranks go from private to colonel. It takes quite a bit of time to get there though. It can take as much as 30 missions to get a colonel from a private, at which point they become indispensable and are very hard to replace, because you're probably not gonna have the time to get another one from private to colonel in the same campaign. You have access to the standard categories of guns you find in most games. There's a shotgun that's quite effective at close range and fires 3 pellets. There's a marksman's rifle that is quite accurate but can't fire as much. There's an LMG that fires large volleys of bullets that rarely hit their target, but when they do, they're actually quite deadly. And even if they don't, they can suppress the enemy. And then there's a pistol that you can use with a shield that is great to add survivability to your soldier, and as well as provide mobile cover for your more important ones. And finally, there's the assault rifle that is a general purpose weapon. It doesn't excel in any way, but it gets the job done in most cases. Explosives such as rockets, C4 and grenades are also available to you. They are very useful to blow up walls or destroy cover the enemy might be hiding behind, and they also pack quite a punch, often able to one-hit kill most enemies. There's a downside to using them though. Money and resources gained at the end of a mission is based on what can be salvaged off of UFOs and corpses, and explosives destroys them both. When going on a mission, you can opt to replace 2 of your soldiers with vehicles such as scout cars and tanks. They have powerful AoE attacks and can be used as cover for others, but they barely have more health than a high-ranking officer and cannot be repaired on the field. They also do not improve over time like your soldiers do, which tends to make them inferior to having 2 soldiers in the first place. As your scientists progress at duplicating alien technology, new tiers of equipment become available. Weapons increase drastically in firepower as they go from ballistics to laser to plasma to mag, and there's barely a drawback to using the higher tiers, except a slightly smaller magazine, which makes previous tiers obsolete very quickly, particularly Tier 2, which is lasers, that is replaced within weeks. You generally can't afford the cost of building them for every soldier, but they are powerful enough that just a few of them make a world of difference. Explosives also only get more powerful as they go up the tiers, but they are replaced automatically at no cost to you. Armor has the most variety in terms of upgrades. While most only improve damage resistance, some give new abilities such as a jetpack, which allows you to get on top of obstacles or on roofs for better scouting and sniping, or another that makes you a bit of a tank with lots of armor and gives you the ability to wield heavy weapons much more effectively, although it comes at the cost of a loss of line of sight, as well as a restricted access to what you can use, such as grenades that just can't be used anymore. And finally, interceptors improve as well over time. Their weapons are automatically replaced as soon as their corresponding research are completed. You can only get new, more durable and faster models by doing specific research related to them, and the new planes generally have a different weapon loadout. All in all, it's always exciting to get access to new tiers because you know they're going to be much more powerful than whatever you've got at the moment. The problem is, it's always upgrades rather than side grades. Your tactical options just don't improve all that much over time. You can build a command center anywhere on the geoscape and start building from there. Base building is pretty rudimentary. Each base has a 6x6 grid where you can place all kinds of rooms, like living quarters for your troops, and hangars and garages for your vehicles. And then there's labs and workshops for your engineers and scientists. Some are more useful than others. You can be perfectly fine without a medical center, but without a radar array, your base is as good as useless. The layout you create will be used during base invasions, so if you want you can build your base around that fact and build choke points that are advantageous to you. Bases are expensive, and any money you spend here cannot be used to equip your troops properly. So you gotta make sure you build as few bases as possible and cover as much of the world as you can. That usually means building bases around the equator and building the maximum amount of radar on them. The game definitely has flaws though. The map selection is somewhat small. You'll often have to fight through the same maps multiple times. The location of your dropship as well as the UFO wreckage can change, but the rest of the map stays pretty much entirely the same. Occasionally some cover will change place, but it's pretty rare. So it can get repetitive after a while, although it does help knowing where the cover is going to be, or where the enemy might come from. The inability to rotate maps is also an issue. It makes targeting specific tiles quite difficult sometimes, since the mouse will automatically snap onto walls and other objects. So if you want to target a tile right next to a wall, it can be quite difficult and sometimes even impossible. It can really hinder strategic play sometimes. Psychic abilities can be quite frustrating as well. They do not have any range, so even at the beginning of the game you can get assaulted constantly by them. It's not unheard of for a soldier to flee the field of battle or to get berserk and shoot at his teammates on the first turn because of an alien attack from the other side of the map with no line of sight and no way to protect yourself from it. There's also an odd issue with line of sight when you're on top of obstacles or roofs. If you are, say, 3 tiles away from the edge of the roof and there's an alien on the outside wall below you, you don't have the ability to shoot him, but you can throw grenades at him, which is what you would expect. But somehow he manages to have line of sight and can shoot freely at you while you can't fight back, even though it's clearly impossible to do so. There aren't that many bugs in the game, but there's quite a few that are widely known and have yet to be completely fixed, even after months. Shots sometimes go through walls, and rockets do it almost more often than not. The most annoying one is the Invincible Reaper bug. If you throw a gas grenade at a zombie, he will often come back as an invincible Reaper that will kill every single one of your troops and lead to a squad wipe, and most likely ruin any Iron Man playthrough. In rare cases, the aliens will somehow be able to assault your base that is still in construction and cannot be defended in any way, which means you'll lose 500,000, which can be a massive loss in the early game. The game features RNG prominently. For those that don't know, RNG stands for Random Number Generator. It's what determines whether or not you miss, whether you get hit, whether you throw the grenades as intended. So a bit of luck is needed to get the result you want, and it's likely to get frustrating if you really don't get any of it. A lot of horrible things can happen if you get a bad stroke of luck. Soldiers can sometimes throw a grenade right in their own faces and blow themselves up. Or one of your soldiers with an LMG will kill his own man because of a bad reaction fire. But as you learn strategies, you learn to put the odds in your favor and reduce the number of times it happens. The problem is people remember when RNG screws them over, but not when they get lucky because of it. Overall, I have to say it's a pretty solid game. You really get punished harshly when you make mistakes, but you quickly learn what to and not to do. It becomes really satisfying later on in the game when you do to them what they used to do to you. There's enough content and subtleties to learn to warrant a second playthrough, and you can easily get past 100 hours on this game. I know I have. So if you've just finished XCOM 2 that just got released and want something more, or are just interested in this genre, Xenonauts is a good choice, and it's fairly cheap. I highly recommend it. Thank you for watching the video to the end. If you liked what you saw, you can always subscribe and watch the next videos as they come out. And if you have time, feel free to leave some feedback in the comments below. This is my very first video, so it could really help me get better at it.